relationships is more critical than ever before. And we were having that conversation before COVID. The question is, how do we do that? How do we do that now with everything else that's going on in the virtual setting that we're in? So I'm going to give you an overview of it. I'm going to walk you through it, allow you to ask questions, and we'll go from there. So let me share my screen. In fact, if you've got a main question right now that you're wondering, even right up front, like what's the number one thing that you're hoping to see here today? Go ahead and even drop it in the chat right now. It's always good to have that up front to see what people are thinking, what you're wanting to see, what you're wanting to hear about. And I'm going to bring up the participants as well as the chat box, and we're going to get going here. So this is our web-based platform. Web-based platform that people would see if they were to log in. One of our goals at Character Strong is that we remove as many of the famous roadblocks to implementation as possible. Dr. Clayton Cook is one of the #1 supports that we have at the higher ed level. Dr. Cook is sought after when it comes to helping districts, large and small, with strengthening their school, their district-wide MTSS, that multi-tiered system of support. He specifically really helps on that behavior side of things. And what Dr. Cook says that makes us unique in many ways is not just our research-backed, evidence-based, what is being taught, like the actual curricula, but it also is in our approach to implementation, that we care as much about the implementation as what is being taught. And I don't think that's always the case. In fact, I think one of the #1 things that we're doing right now is doing the work around the adult readiness side. In fact, the key to all of this is adult readiness. It's adult behavior change. It doesn't matter how research-backed or evidence-based it is. If it sits on the shelf or the digital shelf, kids can't benefit from something they don't receive. So we have to do that adult work right alongside what is being taught. The key to all of this is the adults. We can support you in that area. That's an important note. We do that through both like full staff trainings as well as more team trainings that is focused more on the implementation supports that are needed ongoing. We know that we need to get traction, even in the first year. In fact, let me do this real quick. I think we've got, let me stop sharing for a second, and then let me share again. Let me bring this up here. Do one part, one sec. There we go. Let me bring that up. Okay, we'll see how this goes. That we know that the implementation supports are critical. Ongoing. And in fact, in our web-based platform, let me jump back into it, the advisory curriculum for middle school and high school, one of the first tabs that comes up is implementation resources. When it comes to implementation resources, we have a theory of change in partnership with the University of Minnesota and Dr. Clayton Cook that really breaks down how we view this work. There's 4 parts to this theory of change. We call it the CSI, or the Character Strong Implementation Inventory. This is something that your team, your school-wide team or district team can do a self-evaluation on. It's something eventually that we also can support in regards to, at the deepest level of implementation support, do a fidelity audit on. But the 4 parts of the theory of change are this. #1 is school-wide integration. Supporting your school to say, how do we really connect this to the school-wide mission, focus, and values that we have? If not, it's going to be this thing over here on the side that we do every once in a while on a Wednesday. So how do we integrate it into the school-wide focus? #2 is the adult relational practices that are happening from a tier 1 lens. The key to all this is the adults. Well, how do we leverage the adult relational practices that are happening in a more consistent and predictable manner? Because we know, even looking through a trauma-informed lens, that one of the #1 things we need is safe and predictable learning environments. So we can support that because we know that ultimately that staff to student relationship piece is critical. We also know the student to student piece is critical. And a way of looking at that is, sorry for the muting piece there. That we really look at is a true tier 1. How do we create a true tier 1? when we talk about strengthening the foundation of everything else that we do, usually when a school gets serious about strengthening their tier one, they'll look at it from the school to student level.
That's distracting.
They'll also look at it from the staff to student level. But what if we could get a true tier one, which would be also the student to student level, the student to staff level, the student to family level, the staff to family level. All of those pieces create a strong tier one. So that's number two. Number three is the actual tier one curricula happening with fidelity. That's what we're going to be going over today. And the fourth component is what we call the student leadership component. The student leadership component is what if we took a smaller group of students, and this is important, ideally who are representative of your student population, that because they're getting more mentorship, more instruction, they're more likely to demonstrate the pro-social behaviors that we're wanting to see school-wide. So in this theory of change, looking at this through a holistic lens, right, that it's multiple touch points, what are some of the things that we hope to see, that we expect to see getting fidelity in each of these areas? Well, one, we expect to see more pro-social behaviors. With more pro-social behaviors, we know it's going to impact the overarching school climate and culture, and it's going to impact that ABC data, the attendance, behavior, and coursework. So it's important to note that we really are intentionally looking at the implementation side of things. The other document that currently is in here is the ILS. And even if you're currently a curricula user, not everybody goes to this tab, and we really need to look at this, because what the ILS does is it's an evidence-based document, an evidence-based tool of what are the actions, what are the behaviors that are needed from the school leader and or leaders who are guiding this work. You could have a bunch of passionate educators, but if it's not being led well. So the ILS really looks at the degree to which a school leader is proactive with this work, knowledgeable, supportive, perseverant, communicative, clear on the mission vision, and available in implementing character-strong curriculum and practices. Before I actually get into the actual walkthrough, it's important to note the things that are needed behind the scenes and ongoing for this to actually be successful. And we can help you ongoing with that work. We are never going to be about, here's the curricula, good luck. It's going to take that ongoing set of supports. All right, so here's the nuts and bolts. When it comes to our school-wide, middle school and high school advisory curriculum, for the middle level, the normal lessons that we've had in place for many years is 35 lessons per grade level, 6 through 8, that are all vertically aligned. They're not the same lessons each year. They intentionally build upon themselves. If they were the same lessons each year, it would be done after the first year. So it needs to be something that is always building upon itself. It helps with the engageability factor, right? The increase of engagement. In fact, every year we're doing an audit on the curricula. We're looking at it, what lessons are being rated higher, which lessons are being rated lower. We do an equity audit on the curricula each year. This is something that we really intentionally are going after to make sure that we are being responsive, not just to the staff needs, but the student needs. So normal lessons, 35 per grade level, 6 through 8. So that's 105 total lessons that are all vertically aligned. The traditional lessons are written to be 30 minutes in length, even though they can be customizable to be shorter or longer as needed. And we have many schools that do that. Now, these lessons are different than the new virtual lessons that we have added. They go right alongside. There's no added cost. All of our schools are getting the new virtual adapted lessons. Those are the ones I'm going to walk through today, because that is our recommendation, that our schools this year use the coming back lessons because of a couple main reasons, and I'll share those with you in just a moment. At the high school level, there's 25 lessons per grade level in our normal scope and sequence, 25 per grade level that are also all vertically aligned. So 100 lessons, they build upon themselves each year. And yet this year, here's our recommendation. It's the coming back lessons. On the left-hand side, currently the first 2 months are up. Within the next week to week and a half, the third month will be up. By September 10th, the first 4 months will be up on the site. And then we're going to immediately go to work on creating the second half of the year. This is a big deal, because we know that if we don't do this heavy lifting for you, the adapting it to a virtual or hybrid setting, it's not going to be implemented with fidelity. And so I want to walk you through these, give you an idea of what this looks like, because this has been one of the big questions. How do we do this? Knowing how critical it is. How do we do it in a virtual or hybrid type of setting? So I'm going to click into like lesson 2 to start, which is titled To-Be Lists. The title really here is To-Do List versus To-Be List. It's one of our new virtual lessons. And I want to talk for a moment about the scope and sequence of these new lessons. It's going to start very intentionally with values clarification. So instead of norming our students, we're going to be very careful of that. That's how it can be weaponized against students of color, especially our Black and brown students. We are not going to norm students where it's like, here are the values that you need to follow. No, we want to give them a space where they can share. Who is it that you want to be? What is it that is most important to you? And so this lesson is about that. It gives them a chance to do that values clarification piece. And then in the next lesson, it's going to allow us to ask the question, great, well, what gets in the way? What gets in the way of us being the ideal version of ourselves? Dr. Michelle Borba, who speaks regularly on this topic, she's on the Today Show all the time. She just spoke this last weekend at our 2-day conference. She says, what gets in the way? Things like fear, anxiety, stress, all of which we know are rampant right now. So then our lessons are going to allow us to start to dig into that, to provide skill sets around stress and coping skills. We're going to dig into emotions, snap judgments. We got some toolbox type trainings. We're going to talk even about things like around sleep, things that connect to what are the skills that we need right now in dealing with all the different things that we're dealing with. And then eventually we're going to start to talk about empathy. Empathy, and even connecting it to the work we're doing around empathy or around equity, because empathy by itself is not enough. Empathy plus action is what we're getting after. So 2 reasons why these lessons that I'm going to walk through are the ones that we're recommending this year. Number 1 is that the community building exercises, the relationship focus that we know is so critical for the start of the school year and beyond, they've already been adapted for you in these lessons to do virtually or in a hybrid setting. The other one is where the focus of the content area is this year, that it's been really specifically focused and designed for this year. What are the things that we're going through and providing skills to support students and staff in that area? So here is a different look and feel. When you click into one of the new lessons, the first thing that comes up is the actual slide deck that you could immediately maximize your screen and go into. But beneath it, before we do, there's 3 buttons. One of the buttons says, how do these work? I'm going to click into that first so you can kind of get an idea here. And I'm going to walk through. Here is how these new lessons work. Number 1, each one of these lessons for middle school and high school has 3 parts. They consistently have these 3 parts each week for the lesson. Number 1 is a community building exercise. I'm going to talk more specifically about these in a moment, but this is not just for feel good. This is not just because it's a good idea. The stakes are high here. In the state that I'm in, the state health department just recently came out with their projections. Their projections for this fall and winter, and what they expect to be an increase in teen suicide ideation. The continued lack of hopelessness. The idea, is this ever going to end? And what the research says is it's not as much about talking about suicide prevention strategies that is as impactful as actually building a sense of connection and community. So we got 2 things working against us, right? 1, how do we do that in a virtual world? And 2, the continued obstacle around how do we make time for this? Because if we're used to 1 to 2 weeks of building community in our classroom, we all know that's not even going to come close to enough. So how do we make time for this over time, realizing we don't need 60 minutes every day to make this happen, but we do need a lot of little ongoing moments that we're weaving into the daily fabric of our classrooms and our schools to make time for this if we're going to have impact. Dosage matters. So the community building part will always be there. Number 2, there's always a content area focus for the week. And then number 3, we always have a character dare. Now, here's what we mean by that. The character dare is a practical strategy a practical challenge of how to put the content area of focus for that week into action. Instead of at the elementary level, where we do a lot of like role playing when it comes to teaching social emotional learning, one of the issues, one of the problems, and I used to oversee this work at the district level, is that I think for so many years, social emotional learning curricula companies solely were focused on the elementary level. And then when we realized it's not just elementary students that need this, it's also older students. And then at one point we realized it's everybody. It's not just students, but also adults that need this. But what happened is they tried to reach up to the secondary level. And that caused all sorts of problems. Because one of the problems it caused is that we kept trying to do the things that we did in elementary to teach it to secondary. When I oversaw the work, we had an elementary curricula that was going well. We had fidelity. It was making impact. It was great. Every one of our middle schools was saying the exact same thing. Our kids are, in quote, done with it. Like, what does that mean? Well, they see it as elementary. It looks similar. It feels similar. They're still trying to do things like role playing. And I'm like, all right, great. You don't have to go any further than that. As a high school teacher, to me, that's a number one sign that someone has not been in a secondary classroom if they're trying to do role playing. So we need to do it differently. How do we do SEL in a way that was specifically designed for a secondary age student? And here's the kicker. Here's the key. It also needs to be built for a secondary educator. We can't just think about how this is being designed for the kids. It's also for the adults who are implementing it, which is the key to all of this. And I think that is one of the reasons why we've been able to be successful in implementing at the secondary level is we started there. We started focused on the secondary level, building something that was specifically designed for them, that would increase engageability, right? The engaging factor would be there, something that was designed for a secondary educator, which means we need to remove as many of the famous roadblocks as possible, which means number one, little to no prep required. If there's prep required on this, you and I both know it's not going to work. Anybody who's worked at the secondary level. So 3 consistent parts, simple to implement. Here is a component of the new lessons. These have been designed to expand or contract as needed. So our traditional lessons were written to be 30 minutes. These new lessons, you could have them as short as 10 minutes. You could go 15 minutes. You can go 30 minutes plus if you want to. But we know that that flexibility is going to be needed for the new reality that we're in. Here's an example. Some of our schools say, well, we meet like now 4 times a week, but it's only 10 to 12 minutes each time. Great. They would still look at these lessons as 1 lesson per week that they implement each day. And by the end of the week, the goal is that we've gotten through all the different parts. And I'll show you a way that you can do that. Some schools, though, are like, we only meet 1 time a week, but it's for 40 minutes. Great. This lesson would also work in that single setting dosage, but we knew that they needed to be designed in a way that would work for both of those settings. With the community building activities, the relationships first slide that's there, we're really excited about this. We've been getting incredible feedback. What's going to happen is, even though this one shows 8, there's now 10 different activities that every week are going to show up. It's the same 10 activities. And instead of our traditional lessons where it's like, here is the community building activity we're going to do, they now get choice. So as students become familiar with some of the different activities, they may really like Deck of Destiny, and I'll show it to you in a moment. In fact, they may pick Deck of Destiny 6 times over the first 16 weeks of the year. And we would say, great, let them do that. Bring in that student voice and that student choice aspect and do the ones that they're connecting with and are working for them. So this is new and exciting where they get a choice each week to do the community building or the relational activity. Here's another thing that it's exciting. Every time you click into one of those community building activities, it is going to be designed for the virtual or in-person setting. So if in the upper left-hand corner, there is a schoolhouse icon, that means that this has been written for in-person. But all you have to do is click on that schoolhouse icon and it will give you the virtual adaptation. It will change to a computer screen icon. It'll give you the virtual adaptation of that same activity. That's a great name, by the way, 6-foot salutation. Some of the activities, if you look at this one in the upper left-hand corner, it has both icons. It's got the schoolhouse icon / the computer screen. That means you don't have to adapt. As this is designed, it would work in the virtual or the in-person setting. And yet, here is how we've been able to create these lessons so that they can expand or contract as needed. In the upper right-hand corner, that little icon, which represents the relationships first, if you click on that at any time, it will take you back to the main screen, the relationships first screen. And from there, at the bottom of the slide, you can navigate to any one of the three main components of the lesson each week, which, if you remember, community building, content, and then the character dare. So here's an example. I could do the 2 to 3 minute version of Deck of Destiny and immediately jump over to the content area focus for the week and be done in 15 minutes. The next time that we meet during that week, I could come in and do another 2 to 3 minute version of picture prompts and then immediately go to the character dare process and be done in 10 to 15 minutes. Or I could do the 20-minute version of Deck of Destiny, which is multiple rounds of a get to know you type of question, and then immediately jump to the 10-minute content area focus and then close it out with giving them the character dare of the week. And now I've got a 30 to 35-minute lesson. This is how you can expand or contract the lesson as needed. That slide deck, by the way, can really help you with onboarding, and they'll be below every one of the lessons. The other thing that's here is an overview video. So it's a walkthrough video, just like I'm doing now, to help when it comes to the implementation for staff, because a lot of times we need to see it again. And then just like all of our lessons in our normal scope and sequence, there also is a Spanish slide deck of the same lesson. So every lesson will always be in English and in Spanish. At the bottom, one of the new pieces that we've added is that there is a research brief for every one of these lessons. Dr. Brian Smith is our lead research scientist who's really doing the behind the scenes work on making sure that everything that is being taught is rooted in research. And then we get the fun task of how do we, through the educators that are part of our organization and getting like user feedback, how do we make that in a way that would be engaging and relevant for a secondary age student? So let me actually come up and click into the actual lesson. These are really fun to go through. As I click into it, here's lesson 2, to-do list versus to-be list. Here are the 3 icons. Every one of these, by the way, is linkable. If I was to click on the content, the brain, it would jump right to that section. So this is one thing that's different, is the slide deck is very interactive versus what we're used to, which is we go from slide 1 to 40 in order. Not these slide decks. They're more interactive, and that allows us to expand or contract. So the community building recommendation for this week is scavenger hunting, because some of your staff are going to need that. We recommend, though, that once they get familiar with it, give students a choice each week, but we always will make a recommendation. The content area focus is to do versus to be. And the character dare title for this week is who will you become? When I click to the next slide for staff, their objectives are built right in. Remember, they should be able to teach this with little to no prep. We can help with that readiness side. We're leading trainings every week, every day right now. The most popular is a half-day live virtual, which really helps to onboard staff when it comes to this. You also can do your own onboarding, but it is something that we're doing regularly, and it's not too late to get one of those on the calendar. So let us know if we can support you in that area. And then the next click takes me into the relationships first slide. The relationships first slide gives those 10 different activities that show up each week. In fact, if you would be willing, and if you're familiar with Zoom, if you'd be willing to be called upon, just for fun here late in the afternoon, all you have to do is hover your mouse over your picture. And when you hover over your picture, like my square or rectangle of my box, the 3 little dots come up, and I can click on rename myself. And so when I rename myself, my name comes up, and then I'm going to put an exclamation point in front of my name. By doing that, if you would be willing to be called upon to try one of these little activities, go ahead and do that. And a little Zoom tip, if you use Zoom, it moves those names to the top for me. So even though there's 236 people that are with us right now, I can see really quickly that Patrick Moore has put an exclamation point next to his name, and he's saying that he would be willing to be called upon. So it's a little tip in terms of that. And then know that that's not the only way to participate. In fact, let me show you here. Patrick, because you were the first one that I saw, if you'd be willing to unmute yourself, let me know when you're with me. If not, I can help with that. Let me do that. There you are. Hey, Patrick. So Patrick, let's do a little deck of destiny. And I'll kind of walk you through this. Deck of destiny, if I'm the staff member facilitating, I just click on actual deck of destiny. And you'll notice in the upper left-hand corner that it's got two icons, both the schoolhouse and the computer screen, which means you don't have to adapt. This would work in person or virtually. And the way that this one works, and it needs to be simple, right, is this. This is a deck of cards. Every card in this deck of cards has a different get to know you type of question. So go ahead and pick a card, any card in a deck of cards.
Okay. You chose me last week when you
there you are
at Central Valley School.
You want to pick a different one.
And I be first again. So let's do a heart.
Let's do a heart. First of all, great to see you again. I didn't even realize that. We did do a training together. So you got the heart, and then what card?
9.
Let's do the 9 of hearts. And thanks for being willing to jump in anytime and participate. Here's your question. And for Patrick, he's going to answer it out loud. And for everybody else, go ahead and answer in the chat. What fictional place would you most like to go and why? It could be any fictional place.
The very first thing that came to my mind, since it was a fictional place, Xanadu.
Xanadu. Tell me more about Xanadu.
Well, it's isn't it supposed to be a place where everything is just absolutely perfect and excellent and paradise and that kind of stuff? Isn't that what Xanadu is supposed to mean? So I don't know. That's what came to mind first.
I love it. And I love also all that are in the chat. We got everything from Wakanda to Radiator Springs to Neverland to Willy Wonka's Chocolate Factory, Narnia, Hogwarts, Oz, right? So what's fun about this is it's simple in its setup, but it increases the engagement, gives someone a chance to share out loud. Here's the 2 to 3 minute version. We do one question, someone shares, people put it in the chat, and then we move on. Or we can do the 5 to 10 minute version, which is I do another round. And all I got to do is click back, and then there's another deck of cards. But let me go to the upper right-hand corner. In the upper right-hand corner, when I click on that, it takes me right back to the main screen. Let's try a different one. This one is called GTKY FITB, which stands for Get to Know You, fill in the blanks. And Catherine, you have been an awesome champion. If you're with us, Catherine Everest, go ahead and unmute, or I'll help unmute you here.
I'm unmuted.
There you are. How are you?
Hey, I'm good. How are you?
Good. Fort Worth, Texas. Great to see you on again. Let's do this one.
6 people on here, 6 sponsors, and 2 high school students on here.
That is awesome. I love it. Okay. So you get to role model. So this one, I love this one. It's simple in its nature, but we talk about all the times of like getting to know each other at the beginning of the year. For this one, pick any of these icons, and it's always fun. Some of them, it's like fun, like how you would describe them, but which one would you pick?
I'm going to do the trophy.
Okay, I'm going to go to the trophy. So I go to the trophy, and when I click on the trophy, the get to know you fill in the blanks, it's basically the old Mad Libs, if you remember. And so instead of like the awkward, like, go ahead and introduce yourself, let's have more fun with it. So if you would, think on your feet, just go ahead and introduce yourself by filling in the blanks here.
Okay. Hey, my name is Catherine. I should win a trophy for Google Classroom. If I dedicated all my time to it, I would want to be #1 in the world at creating the Bitmoji action interactive stuff for kids. Someone who has won something that I respect is my brother, who got Special Teams Coach of the Year with the NFL.
That is amazing.
Yeah.
So cool. What team? Can you share what team?
Yes, he was, he retired from the Steelers, but when he got that, he was with the New Orleans Saints.
So cool.
Yeah.
And what's simple about this exercise is usually if a student or a participant fills in the blanks, as the teacher, I just ask 1 or 2 follow-up questions. It's simple. It's a chance to get to know each other. It's one that we can come back to multiple times, not only in the initial lesson, but we can come back to it again. And who knows, you might have students who are like, let's do the GTKY FITB because it's fun and gives different people a chance. Let's go to picture prompts.
Oh, wow.
And at least to demonstrate one more. And let me go to Charlotte Fisher. I see that you put an exclamation point there. If you'd be willing, I'll help unmute you here. And thank you, Patrick and Catherine, for joining in, being willing to share. Let me know if you're with me here. Is it Charlotte? Charlotte Fisher. If not, how about Caitlin Tin? See who can unmute the fastest. Caitlin, are you with me?
Yes, I am.
There you are, Caitlin. So Caitlin, here's how picture prompts work. It's kind of fun. You end up picking a box. So it could be like B4 or C7. And a picture is going to be revealed. And the simple idea here is use the picture to inspire just a 30 to 60 second at most, right? It could be less than that, but at most, either a story or somehow how that picture connects with you.
Okay.
All right. So go ahead and pick any picture
Let's
or
go
any
with
box.
let's go with B7.
All right. So I'm going to go to B and then come over to B7. Here you go. Here's your image, picture prompt. Sometimes you got to get creative. Sometimes there's an immediate connection, but what is a way that you can connect with this picture?
I played select soccer until I shattered my ankle when I was 10.
Oof. Was it in an actual soccer game?
I had a small fracture and my select coach was kind of mean and made me play on it. So I shattered it and wasn't able to play after that.
And have you never played again since that time?
Nope, because I am missing part of the bone in my ankle because of it.
Oof. Thank you for sharing. What was your favorite position in soccer?
I played goalie. It was my favorite.
Me too. That was my position for many years. That's awesome. Did you have a favorite goaltender like growing up? Were you like a Hope Solo fan?
I do. I mean, I know who Hope Solo is. I didn't. So the funny thing is I loved playing soccer, but I hated watching it. So
Okay.
I don't follow soccer. And I was really young when I did it, so it's not something that like I have.
Yep.
But I will say the good thing that came out of it was I ended up joining a competitive swim team and swam in college.
Wow.
And I've coached and taught for 15 years now. So I found a new love because of that horrific experience.
That's amazing. I love that. And what's your favorite stroke? Like your favorite swimming
Backstroke.
Backstroke. Super cool. I love it. Thank you for participating. Just wanted to show everybody that's with us today just a few examples. Every one of these has a way that you can do it virtual or in person. It could also be done asynchronously. If you're doing some sort of like a screen share type of thing, and we were doing like a starter activity in our class, I could do a simple 30 to 40 second screen recording of me like clicking into Deck of Destiny and saying, last week Brian picked the Ace of Spades. So I'm going to go into the Ace of Spades here, and here's how I want you to respond in our Google Classroom or Schoology, whatever you're using. But here's our question for the week. If you didn't have to sleep, what would you do with the extra time? And so setting that up, giving them a place where they could respond even asynchronously so that they can learn from each other, see what the responses are. I could even add as a part of my entry task that in that shared doc, so we can all see what each other is saying, that you need to share your answer and then respond to at least 2 other students' responses, right? By asking a question or making a compliment or a comment on it. And because you have that accountability of everybody sharing in the same space, right? All eyes are on it. So you could even do these in an asynchronous way, knowing that the ideal is that there's some form of synchronous learning that is happening either virtually in person or actually in person at some point. So you can kind of get the idea of these different ones, that you might have the short version of Deck of Destiny, you might have the longer version of Deck of Destiny, but even the tool, the tip of at the very beginning of the year, if all we did was get good at this tool, we would be making some really solid traction. We need to put a focus on the relational work first. And the tip that I would give is do these with your staff, because your staff need it as much as the students. They need to connect. They need time to connect. And in doing these activities, say in your virtual meeting, or even if it's in person at some point, or hybrid of some sort, in doing it together, you're showing them how to use the tool. That is why we've added lesson 0. Lesson 0 is just this slide deck that you could bring up at the beginning of the year before you even get into the lesson. So At the beginning, you use one of these. There's even more serious ones like COVID questions. COVID questions are, we're going through this, so let's not hide from it. I may not start with this, but at some point we could come to it. Share your name and choose one or more of the prompts to reflect on your experience so far with COVID-19. We need to give space for student voices, the opportunity to connect and have these conversations. These also are built in as a tool. At any point, if this was a normal lesson, I could go to the bottom and jump into the content area. I click on the brain, it comes up. These are all designed in a way that would take little to no prep. That's what is required if it's going to work. So it's simple instructions. This one's on the to-do list versus the to-be list. Taking a piece of paper, it's going to ask students to write down multiple things that are on their to-do list over the next 24 hours. But then it's going to ask them to write to be at the top of the page, and then to write down 2 to 3 things that you want to be today, like kind, present, playful, grateful, or committed. Leaving some space, it then asks them to write down something that would take 5 minutes or less to put each of those things that they want to be in action today and or this week. Simple in its nature. It needs to be simple before we start to then ask the question, well, what gets in the way of this ideal, right, version of ourselves? And then start to get into providing tools, skills, to then deal with the adversity, the collective grief and trauma that we've been experiencing. What this is going to lead to is a debrief conversation that the staff member could have with their students. And then at any point, it'll either naturally, if I click, go to the character dare at the bottom, or I could click on it. And to increase fidelity, we've included instructions in the early on lessons on what the character dare is, what it is meant to do. Having done this for 10 years myself at the high school level, I would say trust this process. There's multiple reasons why the character dare process works when it's implemented correctly. So what happens is last week, we were given a character dare, specific challenge on how to put that week's content focus into action. And as a reminder, this is the tool that we're going to use to discuss each week. So it's consistent. It's what we call, it's a play on the idea of a dare, the truth or dare process. And the reason why it works is it does not require students to have done the actual character dare each week. In fact, if you didn't attempt it, which there might be many reasons why you didn't, maybe you weren't ready, maybe you forgot, there could be any reason. Instead, that's all right. In that case, speak your truth, which means, what do you think about it? What do you think about last week's character dare? Do you agree with it? Disagree with it? In your mind, what made last week's challenge hard or easy? Did you connect with it? Why or why not? So give students that opportunity to bring their voice in, to learn from each other. If they actually did attempt it this last week, then share your experience. What happened? What did you learn about yourself? What did you learn about others? That consistency matters. It gives everybody the opportunity to share. It still gives the opportunity to have high expectation, right? But it's okay with that support if you didn't do it. But we are going to give each other the opportunity to learn from each other each week and to share. So last week, here was the character dare that was connected to the lesson. Here's the research-backed strategy. It's hard to have a negative thought and a positive or grateful thought at the same time. So very practical. Over the next week, try to see one new thing each day that is positive and record it somewhere. Write it down. Take a picture or video. You want to be more specific, try to find something positive in 1, a person you know well, 2, a person you don't know, 3, a staff member, 4, a family member, 5, your environment, 6, online, 7, even your world. And then let's talk about it. Let's create space to have that conversation in a fun, playful way, the truth or dare, obviously, but it's the prompts that matter. Gives everybody a voice. And then here is this week's character challenge that we're going to send them off with that is directly connected to this week's lesson. It's titled, Who Will You Become? Over the next week, try to create a daily to-do list and to-be list with at least 2 items on each and aim for 100% completion for 5 consecutive days. You can keep the same to-be list words each day and try to build a habit around actions related to those words, or mix it up each day and see if you can find an action that feels fun or meaningful enough to stick. And then next week, this is the one that we're going to be talking about. Each lesson, if you're going all the way through in order, always ends with kind of an exit intentionally activity. This one is looking at a quote. What does this quote mean to you? You may have to fight a battle more than once to win it. Margaret Thatcher. How does it connect to what we've been talking about today? This is an example, a walkthrough of our newer virtually adapted lessons. The next lesson is what gets in the way. Then it gets into how emotions work, snap judgments, which is really cool, the different pieces that are included in these. And then, like I said, next week to a week and a half, you're going to see the 3rd month up. Then you'll see the 4th month up by September 10th. And then we're going to add the 2nd half of the year, 16 lessons. These are the ones we're recommending this year that our schools implement. All right, let me bring this up and see. I'm looking for the document. See if we can Slack it to me, the team directly. There we go. Yep, I'm gonna bring this over. All right, let's see if there's some questions here, and I'll stop sharing my screen. Questions from the group. Are the coming back lessons the same for all grades? So for this year, for middle school and high school, we are recommending that you use the same lessons, kind of like a year 1 track, and that is on purpose. They were designed that way. And then what it's going to do over this next year is give us the time and the ability to add to our normal scope and sequence many of the new cool tools that we've been adding, because who knows the next time that we're going to be in this virtual or hybrid type of setting. So we want then that year to be able to infuse those, so you won't have to worry next year about doing the same lessons. You'll have still that vertical alignment as you enter back next year and then add them into their grade level. Says, let's see, do we do the coming back lessons instead of year 1? I think I answered that. This might've been early on. You still have choice, but we do recommend that these are the lessons that you do this year. You do the coming back lessons because they were designed for the virtual hybrid type of setting. Once we complete the coming back lessons, where do we go? Well, you're gonna have enough for 1 per week for the entire year almost. So I would recommend that you do those because you'll end up having 32. After that, you've got lots of different places that you could go. You could be bringing in some of the traditional lessons that are there. Here's another thing that you can do that many people, I would say 95% of our schools that use the advisory curriculum also use something called the Character Strong Gym. And the Character Strong Gym is a library of resources for students, staff, families, administrators, on ways that we could weave this into the daily fabric of our school. So it gives us more. So as an example, one of the things that's in here, I showed you a student character dare. There's also a need for the staff when it comes to character dare. We've got 2 years worth of staff character dares, which are really proactive relational strategies. Something that you could push out once a week to staff that plants that seed, that gives an idea, because we know that we need ideas, especially when times are stressful and tough, on how to do this work that might lead to even more ideas. The reason why the staff character dares work so well is they're not you have tos. They're just invitations. They're planted seeds of things that they could do. So you got 2 years worth of those. You have an entire year's worth of admin character dares because they're leading the work. In fact, we're working on the 2nd year right now, and there's already some added. These are ideas for those that are leading the work. Just like the staff ones, there are ideas on staff to student, staff to staff, staff to families. Same thing with the admin. Some of these are admin to staff. Some are admin to students. Some are admin to family. But ideas relationally, proactively that we could be doing to really increase the positive school culture and climate, the relational connection that we know is so critical. We also have an entire year of family character dares. Ideas that you could send out once a week for families to practically engage in this work. I don't know about you, but as a parent of a kindergartner, I just need practical ideas right now, like help me with practical ideas. And so sometimes sending that out and giving them practical ideas can increase engagement. And yet to go to the specific question that was asked, there's other things that are in here. Like we've got a 5-part series that is just on stress and coping for students. We brought 6 students together from different walks of life during COVID-19. And there's about a 10-minute video each week. It's almost like a little reality show, but there's a slide deck for each of these. And it takes these 6 students through providing them each week with a character dare, a specific strategy on stress coping skills, and then a practice of gratitude, because it's hard to have a grateful thought and a negative thought at the same time. And each week they come together. You can watch this short video. Houston is facilitating that conversation. Houston's our co-founder. And then it gives some real practical strategies for staff and students to consider when it comes to stress and coping skills. And so this is something that you could use as another supplement, a standalone set of 5 lessons that would support the work you're doing. Here's another idea that's in here. There's both an activity and video library. So let's say the second half of the year, we do come back in person or some sort of a hybrid type of setting. The activity library people love because it uses a tagging feature. And so here's an example. I could come in here and say, all right, I teach 6th to 8th grade. And the time I want for this activity is only 1 to 10 minutes. And the group size I want for this activity is not individual, not partner. I want it to be a small group. Actually, you know what? I don't want it to be a small group. I want it to be a partner activity. And the risk level I want for this is low because they don't really know each other very well. And the type of activity I want is not a debrief, not an energizer, not an icebreaker, not a name. I want it to be a get to know. And based on how I just tagged it, 4 activities show up. And I could click into any one of these. I might click into my name isn't and go, I don't really like that one. I might click into reception line though and say, I could do this. Materials, none. Here's a simple set of instructions, an optional activity, and then some debrief questions. We have the same type of tagging feature for a video library. So if you're looking for a clip on empathy, you could use the same type of tagging. I'm looking for something under 5 minutes. I want it for this grade level. The topic is empathy. And then maybe 6 clips come up that I could click on and that there's a debrief set of questions included. So there's a bunch of other things in here, including our entire 30-day kindness journal challenge. Every one of these was designed during COVID, where there's things that you could do from home that don't require physical contact. So these are things that you could do that you could get behind as an entire school community. In fact, we already have entire districts sending these out to their families once a day for the first month of school. And every one of them has a designed image that you could put out. The idea here is 1 person a day for 10 minutes or less a day for 30 straight days of putting kindness into action. This was one of my favorites during the time when we first put it out. That's included, as well as these virtual assemblies. The virtual assemblies are really cool. During COVID, at the beginning for 9 straight weeks, we reached out to all sorts of different authors and speakers, people who in many cases were just at home, willing to give of their time. And for each of the different character traits that we focus on at the secondary level, we invited these artists, these authors, these musicians, these speakers to come and share their message. We did these live for 9 straight weeks, and then we took their individual presentations and pulled them out. And then there's a guided notes page or reflection sheet for every one of them. This is Chris Singleton, who's an author, a speaker, a former Major League Baseball player. His mom was also killed in the Charleston church massacre. And he speaks powerfully on forgiveness. I got to see him in front of 4,000 high school students in Washington State right before school shut down. I recently purchased his new children's book that just came out. An incredible speaker, incredible man. Kate Garnes used to work for Disney. Samir Ghazi from Young the Giant gives a musical performance, but he also sets it up through the lens of forgiveness. So these are all tools that you could use that are part of the gym that could complement what do we do after the virtual lessons. All right, it says here, how many coming back lessons will there be? There'll in total be 32. Will Character Strong be adapting the leadership curriculum or add the virtual return lessons to that as well? I would say reach out to us on that. We're doing tomorrow our second part in a series on student leadership in a virtual world. I'm going to have at least 10 state student leadership presidents from around the country talking about ways that they're adapting what they're doing around student leadership to the virtual world. And so we're going to be continuing to provide resources to our leadership curriculum users. So continue to reach out to us on that, and we'll be providing more. Let's see, do the lessons link with Canvas? So it is its own web-based platform. So we are working with schools to help them on how do they do this most effectively, but it's not something that you would rip out and then be able to put on its own, because then we lose all protection, obviously, of the curricula. But there are many different ways that you can do that, including using like screen share and different things if you're needing to do it in an asynchronous way. So I can guarantee you, we know the situation. We've been talking with schools about it. Reach out to us if you have a specific set of questions on that end. Can you edit the slides? The answer to that is unfortunately no, because once we do, then once again, we lose all protection of the curricula. You can add your own pieces to it, and many schools do by having kind of a pre-slide deck or a slide deck at the end where they might add something that's specific to the school, but it's not something where you can edit the actual lessons. I'm confused as to which lessons to start with, the first year or the coming back. Do the coming back lessons this year. They're right under the tab when I click on advisory, coming back lessons. These are the ones we recommend. They were designed for this year and the time that we are in right now. How to navigate and use the lesson PowerPoints and virtual lessons. I think that was at the beginning, and I did answer that, kind of did a walkthrough. It says, when districts and schools purchase, who has access to the web platform? Just admin and counselors or teachers as well? Great question. Everybody gets the same login and password from your school, so everybody gets access. So then it comes, how are you sharing that out to your staff? How are you rolling it out? So it might start with the admin and counselors, but then once you start to roll it out, everybody would share that same login and password. If we're a junior high, no sixth grade, can we just start at grade 7, or do we need to start with the grade 6? No, you can start at grade 7. And we can also help you with that implementation. You can start right into that grade level. In fact, this year it's easy. Everybody should be doing those same ones, the coming back lessons. But in the normal scope and sequence, you could drop them right into there. Or if you want, you could start with the year 1 lessons, which technically would be 6th grade, and then drop them into their grade level the next year. So you've got choice when it comes to that. How can I easily disperse lessons to teachers? We are in person now. Well, 1, make time for it, right? Like walk them through it. Don't just give them the login and password and say good luck, right? Make time for it, walk through it together. But the way that you would distribute is you would give them the link, the same login and password, and then they would have get set up on it. I always say add to your PD, where at the same time you log in, at the same time you all click the remember me button, at the same time you all click favorite. So it's literally right there. So you don't have Mr. Smith always coming down every week and saying, I lost my password, right? So you got the same login and password, and that is how you would deliver it to your staff. Let's see, are we able to post these slideshows on our LMS for students to use, see if not able to attend a lesson? So reach out to us and let us know specifically what you mean by that, but the same idea applies here. It's a web-based platform. It's not the students that get the login and password. It needs to be the staff member that has that, but there are many ways to use the different components here in an asynchronous way. And there are many schools that are doing that. So if you've got more specific questions, I'm on calls all the time. We have multiple team members that can jump on and support you when it comes to the implementation side of things, and we can make sure to add that link as we get into the year. We can reach out to you and connect in that way. Let's see. Is this program compatible for students who are blind or visually impaired to use? So we have a tech coordinator, a CTO, who's been working on making sure that we are compliant when it comes to that. So same thing, we've got multiple schools of the blind and deaf schools that are using our curriculum. So let us work with you on that to make sure that we are meeting your needs. So that would probably be a specific reach out to make sure that if there's other things that we're needing to add, that we're going to work on that for you. If there are videos in the lesson, are they in Spanish as well? So right now, the way that is that every video has the ability to do subtitles so that you can use that in different languages. Currently, that's our status in regards to our videos. So you could use that in Spanish using the subtitles on any of the videos. Anything that is student facing though, that's in the slides, would be in English and in Spanish to support that. How would you use the Spanish slide deck when you just need it for a few students in an advisory group? I don't know if I'm fully understanding that. If you're wanting to deliver it in the Spanish setting, then you could use the Spanish slide deck or the English slide deck, even if it is a small group of students. Is there an editable way of doing these? For example, Deck of Destiny with math problems. Well, you can always create your own, but we don't have the ability to just take ours and then change it. But you can create your own, or you can take the same idea and do like Deck of Destiny in different ways. using like an interactive type of slide tool. And that could be really cool. I like that idea for a math classroom. And I like that this has spurred that idea to put that focus in a more engaging way for your students. Can this work outside of advisory time? I'm looking for a way to get to know each of my middle school classes. Absolutely. I would use that relationships first slide and other settings, because every class is different. Every experience is different. You could pull a question from Deck of Destiny or picture prompts. The second half of the year, we're going to have different activities and lessons, or different like community building activities that are included. So you get like a refresher, a different set of things that you can do. But I think it absolutely could work in that. Let's see, our site has already purchased the curriculum. Does the site allow me to email the slide deck out to our staff? You wouldn't email, I mean, you could email them the link and their login and password on how they could then access it. If they're logged in and have permission, you can send the links to certain aspects of the curricula, and it will then take them right to that. We were working with a school just the other day. So you can send in those ways the link to certain like pages of the curricula. If someone's logged in, it would take them to that. Let's see here. Do you repurchase each year, or is there a different pricing guide for renewing? That's a great question, because that's one of the things that makes us unique. You are not paying the same upfront cost each year for our curriculum. There's a higher upfront investment, but then it drops to $4.99 in year 2. And that's a big difference. So year 2 is $4.99 to stay in the advisory full school curriculum. It includes any and all updates that we make. Year 3, it's $4.99. If you want to add the gym, it only becomes a one-time investment of $249. If you buy it with the advisory, you never see an ongoing renewal for that. The only thing that's different is professional development, because we obviously need to pay our presenters. So in that case, it's separate. But for the curricula, if it's a single school on the advisory curriculum, the upfront is $3,999, but then it drops to $499. The way to bring down that upfront cost is if it's a bundle. If there's more than one school that is a part of a district, you can bring down that upfront cost significantly. Also, if you're in a really unique scenario, like the school I talked to a month ago, that they had 44 students pre-K through 12th grade, please reach out to us. We get that. We will talk to you about that scenario when you have 4 graduating seniors. So there is a way to bring down that upfront, but the renewal is $499. And that includes our schools who bought 2 years ago. They're getting an entire new curriculum for this year virtually for $499, their normal renewal. It doesn't change. Is there anything created that students can use to keep track of all this? Is the idea that we're taking notes on paper and then submitting them somehow? Or is there something electronically created for this? So that's that's teaching. So lots of schools like to do it different ways. It might be a shared Google Doc. It might be a reflection journal. But remember, the key to this is remove as many roadblocks as possible, right? The key is dosage and frequency, that they can't benefit from something they don't receive. So if you want to use something like that, you can, and people use different tools for that. That would be in-house so that you've got control of it, not us. So there's different ways that you could have them doing reflection on it, but it's not designed to be graded. It is not designed to have assignments that you're turning in each week. It's been designed in a way that they would receive it, right? And that they would get that instruction. And then probably one of the number one ways is to use a different reflection tool as a way to have them processing, and you could keep that internally as an advisory teacher or in your school. I'll try to bust through knowing that we're over time here. Is there anything created that students can use to keep, okay, see, is there a specific page for the renewal price? Schools automatically get a renewal sent out to them. We can send a specific page. I don't know, like, if there's what you mean in terms of like that part, because you would automatically get it set out, but the team can help with that in regards to what you're looking for. So the lessons are considered 3 parts. I'm confused how this is the whole year. I only see the 8 lessons. This might have been asked early on. There's going to be 16 to start the year by September 10th. There'll also be another 16 that are coming out this fall, and that's on top of the normal lessons. I would look at them as 1 lesson per week, that you could deliver those 3 parts all in one setting that could easily fill 30 plus minutes, or you could take that 1 lesson and break it into 4 days if you're meeting 4 days a week for a shorter amount of time. So if you have questions around that, let us help you with the implementation side. Sign up for a call. We can talk you through it. But there's a lot of different ways. It was built to be customizable to meet your different needs. Some random questions that came in. I need to buy in I need buy-in from my students to turn their cameras on. Yeah, that even gets into just the equity conversations. That's going to be a whole different topic in regards to that. But I think it's something that you should be digging in. There's lots of articles on the idea of requiring students to turn on their cameras or not. And so I'll leave that for another day in conversation in regards to the buy-in type of thing in terms of the cameras. It might not always be a buy-in issue is what I'll leave it with right now with where we are. What is tier 1 from? Tier 1 is when you look at like the RTI triangle or the layers. Tier 1 means all. It's the universal set of supports. It's what are we doing for all students and what are all staff engaging in. Tier 1 is the foundation, and all. Tier 2 is some. It's what do we need to do for some, right? To go more, that need a little bit more. And then tier 3 is few. It's those that need more intensive supports. But guess what a student in need of tier 2 or tier 3 supports needs? A strong tier 1. No matter what, we always need a strong tier 1. And this is where we live, is in that tier 1 foundational set of supports. We are delivering CS K through 8. I want to also include family, community, admin, and staff. Do I just use the gym to vertically add activities, dares, trait education? So if you're doing K8, K through 5, built into the home resource for every one of the traits is a family resource that you can send home each month, and included in that are 4 what we call purposeful pursuits. That is the character dare at the elementary level. So it's 1 per week, something that you could connect families to and the way that they engage with it. So in your toolkit, if you look in there, there's going to be a set of home resources. For the secondary level, yes, you would use the gym, where the family character dares, the admin character dares, and the staff are there. And if you were doing full implementation, it would be 1 a week that you're sending out to each of those groups. What is the difference between the advisory curriculum and the leadership curriculum? So it goes back to that theory of change. Advisory curriculum is built for school-wide. It's built for all staff to engage in it and teach it, which means it needs to be really easy to implement and for all students to be exposed to it. It brings together social emotional learning right alongside the character ed piece. The leadership curriculum is different. It's going to require prep. It was designed for a smaller group of students to give them more training, more instruction, to dig deeper into leadership skills, to dig deeper into that values clarification. It is built to get students in a more intensive setting to be more likely to demonstrate the pro-social behaviors that we want to see, because they're getting more dosage. They're getting a heavier workout. Let's say we go to the gym, right? Because we're talking character strong and we've got the gym. We go to the gym. Some people walk on the treadmill for 20 minutes. Some people go to the gym and they lift weights for an hour and then they run for 30 minutes. The leadership curriculum, it's the heavier workout. It was designed intentionally to work side by side with the advisory curriculum when schools can do it. Final one, I will be using the coming back lessons with my leadership class. So I'll have to grade these as assignments. Is that bad? I don't know if it's bad. You might have to get creative though. If you're meeting, I don't know how often that you're meeting, but the way that I would say to grade this is to grade their reflections. Don't grade them on whether they did the character dare or not. That will work against you. You can have them track how many that they did. In some cases in my leadership class, we had 40 straight days of character dares and they had a tracking form. Some of my students did 3 out of 40. I didn't grade them on that. I graded them on them turning in their reflection forms of what did they learn through the truth or dare process. And just a little side note, some of the students who did 3 out of 40 or 7 out of 40 showed way more growth than my students who did 40 out of 40. They did those 7, and sometimes those 7 were really hard ones. And I always wondered, would they have been as ready to do those specific character dare challenges if they weren't a part of the daily and or weekly conversation that we were having, where we were learning from others, that there was accountability in those reminders? That is how I would grade it. If anything, is through that reflection. Be very careful of how we grade leadership and or social emotional learning. Usually it's through more reflection or perception-based surveys. If you want an estimate, and I know we're over time because there was more questions than normal, which is great, we're going to drop into the chat. If you want an estimate of what this would look like, you might be saying, I got 3 middle schools. What would it look like for the advisory curriculum in the gym? What would that look like in a bundling situation? You could fill this out. We could send it to you. If you want to talk, have a conversation about it, I'm on 15 to 20 Zoom calls a day, and we could work with you on what this might look like for your school So feel free to request an estimate. We'll include that individual calendar slot. I'll be adding some slots more over the next couple of days. Let us know. You can also email us at info@characterstrong.com with an immediate question that you might have, because your timeline might not line up with our availability. And then we are going to have another elementary and secondary walkthrough coming up soon. We're going to try to do them weekly. So we'll put those into the chat. Lots going on. Appreciate you making time at the end of your day. If there's anything we could do to dig deeper into your specific questions, please don't hesitate to reach out. Thanks, everybody. Appreciate your time.